Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. So, February is nearing a close. It's a short month. So, as we're still winding down this month with all of the stuff that's out there, let's talk March. Because March, it's not slowing down anymore. If anything, it's probably just going to speed up even further. Because stuff's going to start to overlap. You're going to have to start to choose what, when, where, how much. So, let's talk 3 Kickstarter games that I have my eye on in March that I think you should know about, what we know about them, when, and just anything else of interest about them. Let's talk. So, we're going to go right into things, not a whole lot of preamble today. First up that I think you should know about, and that I have my eye on, is Meeples and Monsters from Ragnarok. Now, why should you have your eye on this? Because the hype is already strong with this one. You're going to start seeing it pop up elsewhere. You're going to start seeing it pop up on the hotness if it isn't already on your radar. Why is that? Because it's already getting an early hype on social media. Rado already posted his playthrough last week, and people are already starting to get ramped up and excited about it. Now, what actually is it? It is a bag building engine builder with worker placement. Now, that last part has me a little hesitant because I really like those first 2 buzzwords. The last buzzword is kind of making me hesitate a little bit. What are you doing in this game? I mean, Meeples and Monsters. If the title doesn't tell you a little bit right there, let's talk a little bit more in detail. What you're doing in this game is you are putting meeples into your bag and you are drawing them, and then when you draw them, you are using them to train to defend your town against, surprise, surprise, dear, the monsters. It's by Ole Steinus, the designer of Champions of Midgard. So that gives you a little bit of insight about maybe of what it may entail or how it may interact. Champions of Midgard is not your typical worker placement game. There is battling. There is some interaction. So if this holds up to that, you may not like it because it may be a little bit too interactive or cutthroat for you. Now, what this really reminds me of when I hear this description is it reminds me a little bit more of Orleans, where you are drawing and placing, and how you draw affects your strategy, and you have to be more tactical than the pure Euro of where it is more of a strategic 3 to 5 turns ahead sort of mind game. But as you can see just on the picture here, this aesthetic looks more in line with the Lords of Waterdeep or the Champions of Midgard just by the way these buildings seem to be placed and some tile overlays right on the board as well. You also have what it appears to be various characters or training slots on your own individual player board that I'm assuming you're going to be using during each round as well. There is already information on the Ragnarok website that there is going to be a solo mode, all of you worker placement junkies out there. There is also going to be, obviously, since it's on Kickstarter, a deluxeification, because what Euro game on Kickstarter would be complete without it? And there is going to be something called the 4 Towers expansion that is going to go along with it as well. So extra motivation to be backing. Now, the question is, with a lot of these games, if you're not going to offer exclusives, are you going to offer a lower price for the expansion included, a la what Root has done in the past, where you are almost guaranteed a lower price? But if you're going to deluxify it, you probably won't offer the deluxifications at retail, so the cost savings for a bundled in expansion may not be present and may be overshadowed by the deluxe price. We'll see. We'll see what the difference is. We'll see how much it actually is. Because these Euros tend to be pricing upwards of $70 to $90 for the deluxifications nowadays, which is, again, not insignificant. And, let's be honest, some deluxifications are really quite nice and necessary. Some are considerably less so. So a lot of it depends on that as well. Obviously, you're going to be defeating monsters. There's also a quest element, and they have an exploring tower element. So I'm guessing that that is going to increase in the variability and the replayability with the previously aforementioned 4 Towers expansion. Why am I excited? Because Champions of Midgard, along with Lords of Waterdeep, along with a little bit of Orleans, are few of the worker placements that I have been able to stomach. And I mean that in a good way, because I am not a Euro person. So it takes something different. It takes more interaction and more oomph, a little bit of take that even, to get me interested. And hopefully, with the meeples, as opposed to miniatures, you may see a slight price decrease overall than what I would otherwise expect. But I'm going to guess, honestly, this is going to run $75 or $80 for the deluxe version already. And if that's the case, especially if those deluxifications are more non-essential gameplay elements, this one is going to be a easy pass for retail, wait to trade for on my list. But I'm willing to give it a shot because it's got some of those elements that I enjoy. I'm not very good at them. Those two things are not totally mutually exclusive, but can be very much so in these games. But I have fun sometimes, and that's what it's about. Now, next up, what? He's not on Board Game Geek? What? Oh, that's right, because there isn't an entry yet for Mythic Battles Ragnarok. That's right, Monolith is finally launching the next in the series of the Mythic Battles God Pantheon splendor that it is. Monolith is finally launching the next iteration of Mythic Battles with the Norse Pantheon, and it will be launching on March 23. What do we know? We know less about this than Meeples and Monsters. Monolith has been sporadically, periodically, putting out images with descriptions with a little bit of background from the Norse mythology on their Twitter feed about some of the elements in the game. And that is where most of the information is coming from at this point. I think the question on everyone's mind and sort of why it needs or deserves or is going to make or break some of the hype is that there is no indication yet how different this is going to be than Mythic Battles Pantheon with the Greek mythology. Is this going to be different enough? Is it going to be something that is standalone, complete, and completely different on its own merits? Or is it going to ride more of the coattails with slight modifications or reskins of Pantheon in the first place? Early indications with some of the models, like this one as an Oathbreaker troop, as well as Thor with Mjolnir, indicate the former. That we are going to see some very unique aspects. The fact that you can throw Mjolnir and it can hit anything, anywhere on the board and come back to you. But Thor, in the lore, is known for having goats that travel with him. You don't see that in the MCU. I'm sorry. MCU's, cutting that out. So you can send a letter to the production team. And he can sacrifice those goats to regain health. And so they're incorporating that side of the mythos. Now, the problem, or the benefit in this case, is most people are not familiar with the Norse pantheon as much as people are with the Greek pantheon. I'm at least speaking from my own personal knowledge base. I learned more about the Greek pantheon in school. And just in general, it comes up in pop culture more often. Now, recently in the last decade, obviously, that sort of shifted gears. But the 20 years before that, was vastly skewed the other way. Because of that, how deep are you going to dig into that? I mean, people are familiar now because of the MCU and a game like Yggdrasil or Blood Rage. People are familiar with the surface elements of the Norse mythology. You're familiar with Hela. You're familiar with Yggdrasil, the life tree. But how much familiarity do you have with some of the other gods? I mean, most people can rattle off in the gaming community, probably a good half dozen to 10 Greek gods pretty relatively easily. But if we start saying, okay, name somebody besides Odin, Thor, and Loki, and maybe Hela, how much ammo do you still have left in the cartridge? Chances are probably not a whole lot. Do you know anything about Vidar, the silent god of vengeance? Or do you know anything about Tyr, the god of war? Me neither. And so then that presents the unique dilemma that Monolith is in. How much of that do you try to create, adapt, stay true to, or skim just the surface of? Because as you saw with Pantheon, a lot of the major gods and goddesses got their own expansions. The Poseidon expansion took the water element. The Hera expansion was more of the earth element. Hephaestus and his forge and the fire, and Atlas and the Titans, all separated out. Are you going to all of a sudden see or hear about the binding of Fenrir and who lives and who dies, and playing that scenario and that campaign element like you saw some of the particular campaign or quest in Pantheon? That's the question. Here's another example of one of the troops, a seer. But to go back to my previous point, did you know that Fenrir and the Serpent and Hel are all children of Loki? I mean, that's the sort of thing that the MCU doesn't really delve into, and it's not your deep blood rage knowledge that's going to tell you that either. But I'm excited because it gives me a chance to learn about it at the same time. I am a huge fan of the Norse, the Swedish, present-day television genres, the Swedish noir, if you will, the crime dramas that they put out. And so I really enjoy their culture. I really enjoy their culture in general. And so for me, I'm really more interested in some of this. But the casual person, the casual backer coming on Kickstarter that may not have done too many before, is that going to be attractive to them? Or is that going to be overwhelming or off-putting? And I don't know. The other question, I think, unlike the other games on this list, is I have not seen nor heard a whole lot of information about videos. Who is going to be putting out videos of this? Are we going to have gameplay, for example? Are we going to have Quackalope and Board Game Co? Are we going to have Man vs. Meeple? Are we going to have Dice Tower? Who is going to have their hands on this? Because there really wasn't anything the first time around on Mythic Battles Pantheon. Anything to that degree. So how much of that influence and element is there going to be? I mean, like I mentioned with Meeples and Monsters, we already know that Rado's got a playthrough, and you already know that if he's got a playthrough, they've probably got it in the hands of at least a half a dozen other people that are going to be launched on the day of the campaign in the first place. But with this, I have no idea. Monolith plays these things pretty close to the vest, so I would not be surprised in any manner. But I hope, and I really expect or even need some of it to be there. To go back to that first point, to show me, don't tell me, I need you to show me what is different than in Pantheon. Because that is the only way you are going to get a person like me, who has almost all of Pantheon, to buy in at a considerable amount to Ragnarok. I'm not saying I will or I won't, but it's going to entice me more the more you show me. This is a show me game on Kickstarter, when you're going to be asking probably upwards of 300. No show me? Going to be very conservative with things then. Then the whole other question is, as with Pantheon, what modes are there going to be? Are you going to see new elements, new campaign styles, new integrations? How is this going to be on par with Pantheon? How easy is it going to be cross-compatible? Will it make sense to be cross-compatible? Is it going to be cross-compatible like Aeon's End or Marvel Legendary? Or is it going to be more cross-compatible like some of the Zombicides, where you can kind of do it, but it doesn't fully make sense always? You know what I'm trying to say. So that is Monolith and Mythic Battles Ragnarok, launching on March 23. So let's talk the third game that I think is worth mentioning. Now, I tried not to cover games that are too similar here, so I'm trying to appeal to all of the tastes out there if you're watching this. So a little bit of everything for you. The third game that I'm going to be talking about has just been recently announced, and that is Everdell, the big box. As well as, it appears, 2 other new expansions. So if you're keeping track at home, that should be 4 total expansions now, I think. Mistwood and Newleaf. That's also going to be launching on March 9. So if you're collecting all of that stuff, you're going to have a box to put it all in, so you don't have 6 different boxes. It's kind of nice, isn't it? Okay, so I don't actually know how many expansions there are, but there are a bunch of mini expansion packs. Again, Everdell is not to my own personal taste. So what is Everdell, though? Everdell is a card drafting hand management Euro-style game, where you're placing workers on the board, on destination cards, performing various actions to gather resources, draw cards, and get, just whatever special actions that you would like to do. The other thing you can do is you can just play a card, or you can prepare for next season. So where you can return workers to your supply and new workers are added, or you can use as a tableau builder up to 15 cards of one of the 5 types to gain resources, to grant abilities, or, if you like endgame points, you can get some of those too. Now, like I mentioned, there's a ton of content out there for this. And so the question just is, from all you Everdell experts out there, what do you want to see? Look, you've got Pearlbrook, you've got Spire Crest, you've got Belfair, you've got the Glimmer Gold pack, you've got Legends, and you've got the Rugwort pack. So, there's a lot of content. Now, I don't know enough to necessarily break it all down for you. with the Mistwood and the Newleaf expansions, what elements are they going to be adding? What is it going to look like? How is it going to be different than the other stuff? Now, the speculation on some of the forums is that the Mistwood is going to add a new autonoma that's going to be easier to play. With Newleaf, you're going to be seeing more critters, more construction cards, another sideboard. None of this is probably going to change the core mechanics of what it is and what's made it so successful in the first place. It's well thought of already, and why change a good thing when you're ranked 36th overall on Board Game Geek? I mean, you're printing money essentially at this point almost. He said, sort of jokingly, not jokingly. They talk about Mistwood maybe having also some more legends, some more lore, more ability to draw visitors up. So the question just is whether or not it's going to be for you. Again, it goes to the age-old question of the other game that's coming out as well this month, Mythic Battles Ragnarok. How much of a good thing do you need? Are you a collector junkie? Are you an all-in junkie? Are you a selective, this looks like what I need versus this is what I can get? It's the classical legendary Marvel Aeon's End question that we deal with all the time as well. How much of that do you need? Can you get played? Is it going to be worth it, bang for your buck, depending on how often you get to the table? And so if this is one of your favorite games, there's a high chance that some of this may be very useful, especially if it's more modules and more content that does not make it too complex. And I think that's always the other concern with expansions. Expansions on expansions on expansions is at some point it's doing not necessarily this sideways, but it's doing this deep in terms of complexity. And there is a limitation to what makes the game good in the first place that can take away with having too much complexity. You saw that with Isle of Skye, the first expansion with that, where it took away what made the game beautiful in the first place, and it made it too not as flowing nicely as what it was necessarily intended to be in the first place, where the second expansion just added more of the goodness, more expansion, more laterally, as opposed to vertically in terms of the challenge and the complexity, and it was thus more well received all around. And that would be my main concern with Everdell. The people who are like it, is it going to give them more of what they like, or is it going to try and change the formula too much? This is a premium product as well, so you're going to be probably talking $100+ easily if you're going to get both of these expansions. Probably upwards of $150 is my guess if you're going to get the big box too. I mean, that's just sheer speculation on what you're going to be seeing price-wise, but I mean, I would not be surprised if it was that pricey. These big boxes, even if you're not getting anything but a box, tend to be expensive, period. Doesn't matter what it is. I mean, look back at the Terraforming Mars one. I mean, yes, they did some 3D tiles, yes, that sort of thing. But the other thing is, you don't know, just like with the Terraforming Mars, is this big box going to be at retail? So there is an element of FOMO there as well. Do I need a box to hold everything? I just got my box the other day for Millennium Blades Collusion that can contain everything. That's a whole nother story, let me tell you. But the question is, do I need it? Like, no, I don't really need it, but sometimes it's nice, especially when it's a purely card-driven game. And I guess that's the question of how it's going to be organized and what is the utility, and is it just a box, or is it going to actually have a well-designed insert that is more than just carrying things? It's actually going to be useful for setup and teardown. Because that's where the Millennium Blades one is really going to be helpful. For the setup and the teardown, which is an absolute bear and beast. Is that going to do the same thing for Everdell? We'll see. So those are my 3 games of interest. Now there's plenty of other stuff popping up that I just didn't mention, but these are the ones I wanted to cover a broad base so that people could know a little bit from everything that's sort of coming out. I mean, you have other things out there that I could have talked about, like Imperial Spells and Steam from Level 99 Games, which is putting out another expansion for that, and probably the deluxeification, hopefully that you can get it at a reduced price. There's a reprint of Super Fantasy Brawl with the new expansions, a new Heroes of Normandy big box, a new Valeria Card Kingdoms game, and a new Sandy Peterson collection of 4 that's going to be launching as well, separately on GameFound. So there's all sorts of stuff out there. I'm going to be talking about it. I'm going to be giving you overviews on it and insights into what it's playing like and how it compares and what's out there. So if you like it, if you're not already subscribed, hey man, get on the train. That's your GIF for this week. And we'll just kind of see where things go. So if these are of interest, let me know. Let me know what you're excited about in the month of March. Especially the first two are definitely on my radar. Okay. As always, thanks for watching. Stay classy. Keep your wallet safe. See you around.